Welcome to the webinar from Martello. Take control of your IT environment and deliver excellence with SLA monitoring. My name is Justin. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of hearing my voice, I think a lot of you will know me. If not, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and follow along. I'm one of our presenters here at Martello, and I am really glad to be joined by Robert Doucet, our VP of Product Management. Just to go over a quick overview of the webinar. So what we'll be looking at is challenges and shifting to remote work, obviously the topic on everyone's to-do list or focuses these days. A quick word from us, overview of Martello solutions, new ways to meet and exceed your SLAs, the topic of this webinar, and an IQ in-depth dive demo. So Robert, I'll leave it up to you to take us away.
Perfect. Thank you, Justin. Thank you for joining today's webinar, everyone. So a quick background about Martello, for those who may not know us well. We've been around for a little over 10 years, headquartered in Ottawa. We have a number of offices around the world, Paris, Amsterdam, Dallas, and as a company, we have been focused on network and digital experience optimization. So, various digital experiences, whether those are cloud-based or services that you deliver internally from your own organization, making sure that users have good and timely access to those services. Given the explosion of remote work these days, this is becoming more and more important. We're publicly traded on the TSX Venture Exchange and deployed in thousands of networks for millions of users that are using our solutions to give them the confidence of the performance of the real-time services that their business depends on. Overview of our product lines. So I mentioned the digital experience monitoring. So this is a problem that's accelerating these days as more and more services are being delivered through the cloud. Users inevitably run into problems with those services, but the providers and companies that are responsible for making sure that those services perform properly are not really able to understand where those problems are, why they're happening, or how to fix them. There's a lot of variables now in terms of what might be affecting that digital experience, right? Is it something in the user's browser? Is it something in their network? Is it on the internet? Is it something in the data center that is delivering that service, whether that's your own data center or something like Microsoft Azure or AWS? So there's a new set of tools that are needed to be able to manage that digital experience. And as we go through this presentation, you'll see that managing and monitoring service level agreements is a key part of that solution. We have a line of business around UC analytics, where we are able to provide detailed performance monitoring capabilities for Martel systems. And then we have networking capabilities. So based on the performance issues that we see with the network, often there's congestion at the edge for the critical services. So using our network technologies, we're able to provide link redundancy, app prioritization to make sure that your business critical services are being delivered first and get priority at the edge of your network over other things that may not be as critical, whether that's YouTube videos or other things that your employees might be doing that want to have a less priority around. And then last but certainly not least, the focus of today's webinar is our IT operations solution. And this is where we can integrate and control data from a number of different IT management systems, whether those are classic monitoring systems, cloud-based systems, service management systems. All that data gets combined into one powerful analytics backend, allows you to slice and dice that data with a number of visualizations to understand what's going on in your environment. So I mentioned there's new challenges now, and this is just a graphic to reinforce some of the trends that we're seeing and some of the things we're hearing from Gartner analysts, that there's an explosion in activity in terms of people working remotely, as you might expect. And, Gartner has helped us with this. And we see that, the peak at the evening hasn't changed a whole lot, but certainly that daytime usage has exploded, right? We're seeing, a 35-ish% increase in that 9 to 5 daily window, which is causing new stresses and challenges for people who have to manage both the network and the delivery of those services. So, I talked a bit about the challenges. As the delivery of these services change, IT departments no longer have the same level of control and visibility over the components that serve that service. For example, historically, if somebody were to be using the Microsoft Unified Communication Stack, some service provider might come to your office or in your own data center, you might do this, but you might deploy some servers in your data center or in your server room that would be running things like Skype for Business and Exchange servers and things like that. You would deploy some sort of application or network management tool to manage all the components that are behind that, make sure those things are up and running. And that's how you would manage to make sure that users had timely and good access to those services. Well, now those servers no longer exist in your data center or in your customer's data center. They're in Microsoft's data center, and users are just accessing that through a browser. So the tools needed to understand if users are able to access those services as they should, and if there are problems, where are those problems? New tools and techniques are needed to solve those problems. So how does Martello fit into that? So, we have a number of tools that can help with those challenges, ranging from the ability to assess the capacity of your network. So if you know you're going to have a number of users in your network or in your sites consuming voice and video services, we have real-time assessment tools to make sure that the network is capable and can manage the load, whether that's your home office or when we all get back to work at some point and you're back in a larger branch office or head office, having the ability to understand, can the network support 50 users, 100 users that are doing real-time voice and video? We can provide that assessment for you. And then on the IT operations side, we can provide a rich set of dashboards that can be accessed remotely so that you can understand how the business continues to operate, whether you're locally in the office or remote. So again, that's the combination of data from popular tools like SolarWinds and ServiceNow and System Center combined together, because often the services that you might be dependent on are spanning those tools or spanning the traditional silos like network and storage and virtualization, but you still need overall visibility across that tool set. And last but not least, we want to make sure that you have fast access to the cloud-hosted services that you might be relying on, whether that's Office 365, Workday, ServiceNow, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, as I mentioned, being remote these days, being able to be notified on your mobile device is a critical part of this solution as well. So I mentioned a bit about Office 365. So this is something that if you haven't seen in the news, usage of Office 365 and Teams has exploded over the last couple of weeks. Even companies that may not have been using Office 365 at all, or at least have not enabled remote work for their company, have had no choice really but to embrace the move to remote work, because we're likely to be in this situation for some time. And it's not something they can just kind of avoid for a week or two. Companies have had to really, really shift quickly and pivot to enable their workforce to be able to be effective remotely. And Office 365 has been a big part of that. Microsoft has done some great things by offering Office 365 trials for free for 6 months. And the explosion of Teams, as I mentioned, has been significant over the last couple of weeks. And Martello's IT operations analytics software, which we'll get into a demo shortly, can help manage the delivery of Office 365. So you'll understand when there are outages. You'll be proactively notified when there are challenges or problems in your Office 365 environment. And you can consolidate that with other data that you may be interested in, whether that's some infrastructure data in Azure or perhaps some on-prem deployments with System Center. We enable you to bring all that data into one single pane of glass so that you can understand, again, everything that's going on in your IT department and how that might relate to the business and the effectiveness of your users. Quick introduction from a top level in terms of what Martello IQ, which is the name of our IT ops management solution, can do. Again, I mentioned it's able to bring in data from different data sources, a number of different IT management tools. Justin will walk through a couple of those shortly. So the types of things that we pull in are alerts, events, incidents, and devices with state. So as a simple example, if you were looking at SolarWinds, we would show you your network devices, your network nodes, your applications, whether they're green, yellow, red, based on SolarWinds monitoring and thresholds, and then any alerts that are associated with that. And using that data, you're able to, one, quickly search through a vast set of data that normally would require swivel chairing between multiple systems. You can organize that data into various boards and services so that you can look at that data that makes sense to you, whether that's by department or city, or functional responsibility, that sort of thing. And then you're able to share that out to interested stakeholders so that they can also get a view into this data. And we manage all the permissions for you right from this single pane of glass. So you're not having to worry about going back to all these individual systems and providing access to parts of that application that you may not want to. We provide a really easy way for you to deploy and share out dashboards that can be accessed remotely, whether that's in a read-only fashion or actually providing the ability for the users to take action and control those dashboards. One of the other popular areas of the product is our integration with service management tools like ServiceNow. So often companies have standardized on ServiceNow as their help desk portal, for example, and there might be some inertia or friction to introducing yet another tool to manage those incidents. Well, Martello IQ can kind of act as the glue between your IT systems and your service management system, where as problems bubble up from your monitoring tools, we can create intelligent incidents into the ServiceNow system, for example, where your help desk will get visibility into a problem, a consolidated snapshot of the details that IQ has understood about that problem, alerts, current data, devices affected, that sort of thing. The help desk user can take action, and IQ can be responsible for cleaning up all the alerts in the underlying systems so that you're not left with a bunch of irrelevant alerts in your monitoring systems. This is a nice graphic that hopefully better illustrates what I've been saying is, on the left side, we have a number of disparate tools. We have network tools, cloud tools, service management tools. Maybe we have some APM tools in there, and they're all providing fairly low-level data in terms of alerts based on thresholds being crossed or devices that are unhealthy based on some alerts or performance data, but they don't necessarily correlate to the business, right? What are the things that you need to keep running that are important for your business? So traditionally, it would take a lot of manual effort to understand when a device were to become unhealthy, what's the impact, right? Does this impact something critical to the company that we really need to prioritize quickly, or is it something that's not really that important and it can wait? And this is important because a lot of organizations are dealing with hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, in some cases millions of alerts and events and incidents, and it's impossible to just go through them all looking for something that might be a problem. You need some better way for the solution to kind of bubble up what you should be looking at. So when all this data feeds through Martello IQ, we can correlate, prioritize, and organize all that data into business services, the output that we see kind of on the right, where now when a device becomes unhealthy, I don't really have to understand where that device is being used, because in my services overview dashboard, I will immediately see that my CRM system, for example, is impacted. And that allows me to prioritize and triage effectively based on the importance of that service. And at the far right here, we see some of the benefits that we have. Stakeholders get the dashboards that they need. We can really increase the visibility to these problems to the business, and as a result, decrease the MTTR, or how long it takes to resolve these problems. And again, just get the business focused on the impact of the business and not necessarily low-level IT component data.
I think if I could interject a little bit in there, if any of you have ever heard from the business, we just want to know if email's running, give us a red and green box, right? That's the right-hand side. That's what we really fulfill as well. Just taking that, giving that to every stakeholder a dashboard. And so if you do hear that, definitely give us a thought on that one, because that's exactly where we're driving on this one. And that's an end result for the benefits there.
So we see 4 key elements to Martello IQ. And I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail before we quickly jump into a demo to actually show this stuff live. So, first around dashboarding. So I mentioned the ability to organize data based on what makes sense to you. And this is really done in a very flexible way because every company may have different needs here. Some people prefer to organize based on department or office location. Some of our customers are MSPs where they're organizing this by customer. So there's lots of different ways that we can allow you to structure this data based on what makes sense for you. You can have really technical dashboards for your operational team, create high-level overviews for your management team, and share read-only views to your management team so they are aware of what's going on, but they're not necessarily going to accidentally start making changes from these dashboards or poking into low-level pieces that don't make sense for that stakeholder. So there's lots of different ways to structure this data and share that out based on the stakeholder that you need to serve. Next is the service monitoring. So this is the graphic that we showed a couple slides ago where we don't want users to have to try and manually map an IT component to the impact when they're trying to troubleshoot a problem. We need to have all the information at our fingertips to fix that problem as quickly as possible. So having that service monitoring view allows the operator to quickly see what the business impact is without really worrying about all the low-level details. You could get a flood of alarms and you don't have to go through 1,000 alarms to understand the problem. You take a glance at our services overview dashboard, you can immediately see which services are impacted. Are they impacting end user? Is it an application problem? Is it a problem with maybe a redundant piece of infrastructure that can wait till later while I fix other end user facing problems? It's a great overview. We see a lot of customers, as the picture here depicts, is a lot of people put this up on their NOC or up on a wall so that anybody can kind of see what the real-time health status is of their critical services. We'll get into some SLA reporting. That's a critical piece of this. So if I'm responsible for delivering a service to either internal users or external customers, I'm often held to some service level agreement for that service. And Martello IQ provides a number of ways to manage that depending on the needs of that service. I mentioned a little bit about the incident management, and this ties into the way we can automate and help you with managing alerts. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I've seen some companies that are dealing with 1 million unique alerts every day. Now, while that's maybe an extreme example, even thousands of alerts a day are very, very difficult to manage, especially if you don't have some sort of automatic approach to doing so. So we provide a number of different ways to, one, search for alerts. If somebody's calling you and asking for an update on a particular device or problem, you have that data at your fingertips. You can save these queries for future so that if that problem happens again, you are immediately notified. And then you can create workflows between your service management tools so that hundreds or thousands of alerts that may be related to a single problem bubble up as a single incident into your service management tool. So the help desk isn't flooded with alert noise, but rather problems and the details of the alerts that support that problem. And then last but not least, as I mentioned, it's critical that we can notify you from a mobile device so that you can continue to work remotely and be notified if things may be happening in your environment. And then ultimately, this provides a unification strategy for your IT department where historically you might have to go to multiple stakeholders who are using siloed tools and stitch all this together either in your head or in different tools to understand what's really going on in the environment. Often, a service or application that your business may depend on cannot necessarily be portrayed by one tool. You might have to look at SolarWinds and ServiceNow and System Center and Nagios to understand if this tool is running. We provide a very simple way for you to understand what's going on with those services in a unified view. And we provide a number of different ways for you to get data sources that may not be in those tools, because we realize that there may be homegrown tools, there may be supplementary information that you want to include, whether that's through PowerShell or something that might be in a SQL database somewhere. We have ways to pull that data out as well and combine it with these views. So the focus that we'll be looking at shortly is the new addition of service level agreements that we've added in the most recent release of Martello IQ. For those who may be familiar with Martello or Civision before the Martello acquisition, service level agreements is something that has been a strong feature set in our tools for many, many years. So this is a development based on hundreds of customers' feedback and help in working with them to understand how they want to manage their service level agreements and how they communicate this to their customers or internal users. So we've provided the ability, based on all the business services that I've mentioned, you can define a service level agreement for your critical services. You can set a goal. We can help you track that goal and give you the information that you need, not only to understand if you didn't meet your service level agreement, why you didn't meet it, and give you enough information that you can understand how you can fix that going forward. Is there a particular device that's the root cause of the failure to meet some of these SLAs? So we'll give you all that information. And of course, measuring it will help you improve it, and we'll give you the information that will support that. So a graphic that kind of hopefully reinforces, the narrative that I've been telling you all. At the very bottom, we have the number of tools that your business may be depending on. Justin will show you the full breadth of integrations that we have available today. As I mentioned, we also have capabilities outside of these tools, whether that's through PowerShell, SQL, RESTful APIs. So, we are able to handle custom scenarios, homegrown solutions, that sort of thing. All this data rolls up into a centralized data layer. And then based on having access to all that data, now you can slice and dice, create your data dashboards, organize your data as you wish, and share that out to key stakeholders. So the service model. So I glossed over this a bit earlier in terms of talking about how from that services overview, you could understand whether end users are impacted, whether it's a redundant infrastructure problem. And this is a real key part of the model that we create. On a simple organizational aspect, you can create what we call a board, which is just a group of components, and it gives you some visibility into a very simple organization of data. Many customers want a more advanced version of that, and that's where the service model comes in. And we structure that data into 3 perspectives: the end user, application, and infrastructure perspectives. And you'll see this in the demo bubbled up into the services overview dashboards. And it gives you an ability to understand which services should be looked at first, right? Often there might be one or more problems going on in the IT department at the same time, and you need some effective way to understand which one should I look at first. Understanding if end users are impacted is a pretty critical part of that process. obviously if there's two services that are red, one is impacting end users and one is a database that's offline in a redundant array, well, that can wait and you can focus on the service where end users are impacted. So we'll see a bit more of the structure in the demo coming up here. So I'll pass it off to Justin and he'll walk you through the product.
Perfect. So hopefully you guys can see everything on the screen. You should be seeing now that I'm logged in with Chrome, just a browser that is not Internet Explorer, that actually can support HTML5 very well. Chromium is a very good option. That's what we've based this on. So what we believe is making this really accessible to people on every device, as Rob mentioned. So I'm actually logged in as an administrator within our current IQ setup in our demo environment. You can have access to it as well. At the end of the slides, we will have a link for this to our webpage, which will give you full access to it. Because we are a caching system, as Rob pointed out, on that environment, essentially what we do is go out and connect to the target systems that you see here. Now, each target system is slightly different from each other. So depending on the system itself, if it has an API that can talk, or if it's got an SDK, for example, or a direct read into the database, WhatsApp Gold is a good example there from, really depends on the integration. Each integration works slightly different. These are our current ones out of the box. For Nagios users on the call, that is basically any single version of Nagios, including the older ones that don't have live status. We actually do provide an API that switches that on for them. If you don't see your solution on there, I get this question lots of times when I do demos for specific environments. We do have our API. It's RESTful, does allow you to pump the information into our data store, and that makes it accessible for the dashboards. Essentially, administrators will be able to come in here once they've installed. It's about a 15-minute to 20-minute process, depending on if you have your server ready or not. Be able to target the information, the target system that they want. So if it's System Center Operations from Microsoft, you just simply put in a tag for what you want in here, the server that we need to talk to, and an account that we use. This generally doesn't have to be administrator, and in fact for the ServiceNow and ITSM tools is advised against administrator because they don't have the abilities to create tickets in their own tools, but any account that you give us is what we have access to it. Each integration has a few configuration settings depending on the system. Some of the older systems like SCOM, for example, doesn't have an API, so we tend to choose to do direct pulls from the database, which can speed up the integration level. Really not dependent if you guys are using smaller versions of SCOM or multiple small dispersed versions. In my environment, I have quite a few hooked up. These are the current ones that are running. Some of them have issues, some of them don't. They are all flowing data into the system, which from a user perspective or administrator is visible underneath these three options at the top here. Very simple, very easy approach. Under home, you'll be able to come in and see tabs of the data. So you can see at the moment here, I have close to 1,092 objects that look like computers. As you can see from the listing here, there'll either be a computer, a physical host, a virtual machine, or a derivative of that. As you can see here, just on the quick list, I have a health state being pulled from the target system. I have a name, which is also associated with the system itself. I have a type and the physical integration that's pulling it in. Clicking on any one of these will give me access to more data around that object. So any of the property fields that you'll be able to pull from your system. Again, each system varies slightly. So you'll see PRTG has this. If I go and have a look for a SCOM system, it will potentially have a little bit more in my environment because I've deployed more fields in there. Azure has quite a lot, in fact, and Splunk and ServiceNow will have quite a lot of fields as well. Let me just clear that search out so you can see it. So as you can see there, very easy to zoom in on the information to see what the component is, its current health state. I have 1,000 objects in here. I have close to 226,000 alerts. Gulp, don't worry, it's not all live. Those are actually historical ones just to show you that we can handle lots of information in the system. This is running on bare minimum, advised setup, but for most of our customers, we can help you out with setting up the cache store and the memory requirements to keep this fast and fluid as you see here. I have also quite a lot of incidences ticking in here, tickets. I have 10,000 of them plus in this scenario, and anything else that's not labeled as a computer, so your network devices, your switches, your ports, they will flow into what we call our components pane. So you can see here, there's a little bit more spread in here where you can actually see Prime, our Martello monitoring platform, PRTG, and a few other systems. Now that's all nice and dandy, Justin. How do I get access to this information and how do I keep track on it? Well, very simply, you saw up here, we have a Google search bar. I'll just zoom in a little bit just to make that a little bit more visible on my screen. So in here, any 3-letter search or 3-letter plus search will get you the ability to zoom in through all of that information. So as you can see there, I went through close to, what was that, 100,000+ objects in a matter of milliseconds to narrow down just the 2 SQL components that are actually monitored from 2 different target objects at the moment. So SCOM is telling me I have a problem, it's not that bad, but my network monitoring platform is actually telling me, that SQL, which is actually the same SQL, has got an issue. Potentially it can't talk on a certain port that we're pinging at this moment. Again, I can zoom in on the information, just zoom out a little bit. So I've narrowed it down on the search to get what I want to do. I've had a look in the properties to see why that search matches what I want. And this is where I'll mention that we can search against anything. So IP ranges, tags that you use, text fields that are placed in there, even tagging in ServiceNow will get you the ability. So if you know which application or which department or which location it's in, you can physically search for that. And you can narrow down the searches. I'll show you a few examples of this. You can zoom in on that information, so we'll take a step down and get a little bit more data around this server. So here are the properties again, just to make sure I'm looking at the right one. Here I get a quick overview of it's got 1 open alert, and there are 4 tickets raised for that object in potentially ServiceNow, My Top Desk, or Jira, which are the 3 systems I have hooked up at the moment. In the last 7 days, it's been not in a red state, which is yay for infrastructure teams. Here are the discoveries against it. Again, this is what we're pulling from the target system. So these boxes and lines will be populated with the more discoveries you get in your systems. Those of you who know SCOM from here, that's going to be your management packs. So you have the ability to see this is a SQL server, that's a SQL database. If I click on this, you'll get more properties around it. That's the name of the database, that's where it presides on, and this is the type it is. Instance name SQL. I get a list of all the live alerts, and I can look back historically if there have been any other alerts. So as you can see, things are being closed and worked on regularly here. I can also do that with the tickets that are coming from ServiceNow against this object at the moment. If at any stage this is the level that we get to, I want to see a little bit more detail on there. We have, within a click of a button, you'll notice it on various different parts when I click on alerts or incidences or tickets, what we call a go to source button, which essentially opens up a tab and attempts to log you into the web front end of whatever system that data is flowing into. So for SCOM, we're using our SCOM integration dashboarding system, which for those of you who may know us from before is called Live Maps as well. And as you can see, essentially logging into here, I get the exact access to the information. So this is where I'll dive down, pull out the performance characteristics that I'm really interested on that disk or on the component that's failing at that moment directly from the data source. Now that's not a Windows single sign-in. As you can see, when we log to other systems, like if I want to go and have a look at ServiceNow, ServiceNow is obviously form set up on the web for me. This is their partner portal. So if I go to the source here, it will not be able to log me in. I will have to log in with a user account. That said, I think I actually just logged in before a demo, so this might go directly to the system. It's not Windows single sign-in. It's good to mention that to get access to the underlying systems, you need to administer users to get access into the system. If you don't want them to see that detailed information, don't give them an account. All they'll get to see is the level of health information that you're sharing up in the top level here. Literally, I've not done anything within our system yet. I have just shown you what's immediately accessible for you. So you will get this list of data pouring in as soon as you get your integrations hooked up from there. So what can you do with the data? Well, let's go back to the searches and see what's possible with that. If you come up with a great search that allows you to keep an eye on information and you want to save it, you can simply press the save button, and this dashboard with tiles will save that search and give you live results. So for example, here I have had in the last 24 hours, 180 critical alerts hit my system. By clicking on the tile, I get that search pulled in, I get the live list to work at, and I can start diving into what those alerts are doing. Of course, I can tailor that to say, well, what did it look like 2 hours ago? And I see that that's reduced down to 31, and I can probably keep going to a couple of minutes to see the last ones in the last few minutes. This way we can handle a stream of a lot of data information so that you can actually work through multiple tools from a single place. When I say work from them, you also have the ability on most of the systems that we can talk two-way with to actually action on them. So what I mean by that is we have a very simple interface at this level that you don't have to dive into your underlying system, where you can resolve an alert, and that'll essentially put it onto the underlying system's closed, resolved, acknowledged settings, depending on the system itself. So for SolarWinds and Peer2G, that tends to be acknowledged. For SCOM, that tends to be closed. If possible, through the connection that we do on the API, we will reset the monitoring on that. So for example, in SCOM, closing alert you actually think that you fixed the problem, we will go and tell SCOM to close down that problem, reset it from red to green, and start monitoring again. If you haven't fixed the problem, don't be surprised in a couple of minutes you get another alert and that object switches back to red. Haha, things need to be cleared off of that disk. One of the other options you can do from here as an action point is pick up that ticket or select multiple tickets and raise these within your ITSM platforms if connected. So immediately we can start streamlining the alerts or to other users. If you say, hey, this is not something I can fix, but someone else needs to pick this up, you can literally come in here, place in the fields that you need to fulfill within your ITSM tool and forward that on as an incident. Within a couple of seconds, that will also show within our incident tab as we refresh against that target system. You may notice down here, we have an ability to track that incident. And if the ticket gets closed down in ServiceNow, in my case, then the alert or the associated alerts around that ticket will also attempted to be resolved from out our system. So it's an upstream, downstream flow from that. So it's not just fire and forget. By the way, this is the manual approach. And again, you can select multiple of these. However, you're going to see when we start grouping the information together, you can actually automate that. And that's what Rob was talking about, how to reduce our alert notifications going to your systems simply by getting the tickets to raise on the way that you want them. So for example, you could do tickets against critical websites. Your web team needs to get a ticket within ServiceNow to say, hey, you have 2 critical websites out of all the websites we monitor, disk full, or specific terms within any one of the alerts. And keep in mind, that's not just an alert from one system, that can be from many systems in there as well. That's one way to use the saves. The other way to use the save is to actually physically come and search for the objects that you want. Keep in mind that your save list could be simply these 2 objects if you get down to your IP ranges or your tags that you want. Pressing save on that search will allow you to generate this as a search term. I'll just do SQL for order entry, which you will see shortly as a service map that I have created in here. I can select the tabs that I want it to populate, so I only want the computers that are matching the search string, and then I can save that rule, which becomes a dynamic updating rule. So if one of my underlying monitoring tools suddenly discovers another server called the SQL, which is my basic rule, it will instantly add it to either the dashboard I'm creating or the service that I'm creating. So let me just create it as a simple dashboard to show you that. Here's a list of existing dashboards, but I will quickly create a new one for you here so that you can see we have an ability to control at the dashboard level how that looks for the general public. What I mean by that is SQL tends to be clustered. If you get all your databases together, high availability, we even look at web components, IIS farms, or even network devices where you have overflow. Potentially on your dashboard, you don't want to show the management that it's red when 1 out of the 3 objects in the dashboard is red. Important for you guys to know and to fix, the infrastructure team. But for the business, what you probably want to do is just show them best case, which is a very simple click from us. Means our dashboard will stay green as long as 1 object in the dashboard you create is green. Now, let me just pin that. That will go off and create a board in our board overview over here. Very simple way to share information with the business. So before this webinar, you will see that I've been a little bit busy. Don't panic. Not everything's red. If I scroll down, you will see, because I'm an administrator, I get to see all of the boards that everyone creates in my system. There are multiple scenarios in here. This is the SQL for order entry that I created moments ago, which you'll see if I flick this over onto heat map, you'll have the ability to see the 2 objects that are grouping in here. And in a couple of minutes, that will roll up its health state, potentially going to be red or yellow. I do have some other boards already created in here for various different scenarios. So I'll just flick it onto what we call the knock mode, which is very handy for large screens. And you can see one of the scenarios that I'll pay attention to, the first one we see a lot of users use, is a geographic spread. Now that could be your data center, that could be your stores, that could be your offices, that could be remote workers, whatever you're monitoring within there. Within my system, there's 2 ways to look at this. I can either look at all the components that are within the various areas. So I have Amsterdam, New York, Copenhagen as data centers. I even have Office 365 because that's not a data center I run, but I have to make sure that stuff's available, as well as the Ottawa location where Rob is sitting. There are various different components in here. I can see immediately from this that New York's probably got a very big problem going on right now because half of the objects are not reporting their health statuses to their monitoring system. So that's probably one I want to go and check in. I can keep an eye on all the alerts from all the components I've grouped together, again, from every system. So I can see that Office 365, by the way, this is live. So if you guys are located in Europe, This is probably happening for you. There's a service degradation right now on Exchange Online. This is actually what the portal from Office 365 is telling us. Now, luckily, I can also go in and have a look if my network devices are down, just to make sure that users can still get there, but at least I can inform them up at this stage that there are potentially problems with Exchange Online if this is going to impact the end user part for them. And we grab all the tickets around there. So already just grouping the data together, I can sort of pre-filter all of that vast information that's flowing in or flowing out from my systems straight away. By grouping them together into a data center or grouping them into sub data centers, I also enable that feature that Rob was talking about, where we can actually notify you if changes happen. So that could be as simply as I've got here, when a new alert hits the board, or potentially what I would definitely advise you is a board state change, which essentially would mean if one goes from red to green based on your settings, you will get a notification or an action happen. Now, an action can be very simply an email push, a team or a Slack notification to a team channel so that you guys get pushed out to it, an SMS push, or a PowerShell script. So we do have the ability to trigger PowerShell scripts. We don't provide them. You guys can have them stored on the system, but you can have a PowerShell script literally pack out from here as well. Essentially, by doing board state change in there, that means that if one object or multiple objects go red in here, I will only get one notification on there. That also then ties in potentially with the automation of the notifications to the ticketing system. So this is where we can set up automatic incident creation. At this stage, I probably wouldn't do it with my geographical layout unless my teams needed to be notified of tickets, potentially in Ottawa or in Amsterdam separately from me. But that is a scenario that we come across quite regularly with our MSPs, who have probably dedicated teams to support dedicated customers. So for example, we have down here, I have that example MSP. Looks like someone's put that onto a green status here for me. Here's an MSP scenario. Again, simply just dividing your information. You could potentially have dashboards, customer 1, 2, 3, with all of their objects separated out. If you want to share it with your customers or individual teams, you can actually block that the users don't get to see the other customers. So you could literally just label out the customers that that team needs to know and be notified about, and they will get live information. And again, we don't block usage of this. So when the notification goes out to ServiceNow or to the email box or to Slack, they will literally get a URL that will drive them back to this dashboard. So you can show them the individual components and information that's important to their daily tasks and their daily incident pickup. One of the things that we run into when the scenario is there is, unfortunately, that putting thousands of objects together in that data center overview, or potentially your email service or Exchange service or your application Active Directory, leads to this box being read a hell of a lot of the time, because the more objects you have, the more alerts you'll get. From the alerts that you get, the more tickets you'll get. Even here, Active Directory is red and I've only got one live alert at the moment. Let's have a look at the heat map that's on there, where I can see that there are multiple objects on there. But Active Directory, if my boss was to walk by on my knock center, would say, hey, are you guys working on that? Is that a real big problem? You and I know that Active Directory is working right now, otherwise I wouldn't be able to log into any of my systems. So no, it's not a major problem. So let's not freak out that team. So how do we show that to the business that makes a little bit more sense? And that's that service model that Rob was referring to, is where we split out the red box to actually layer it into this service overview, where we can start looking at Active Directory from potentially different points of view. What I mean by that is, left-hand side, you'll see Active Directory. Dallas has an issue. Looking at this column, I can represent that the end user components are green. So the tests that I'm running from my APM tools, or from my SCOM, because SCOM can actually just test a simple relationship, or from my network devices, are the ports open, or from essential user synthetic transaction testing that I may have in a script or something, it's coming back green. That's good because I'm logging into stuff, so that's actually proving that people can log in. You can have multiple tests underneath here to prove it from multiple locations. I have actually multiple services, so I have Active Directory Dallas, and I think if you look down a little bit further in the green, you'll see Amsterdam's in there separately as well. I do that for SLA reporting, which we'll come back shortly on. I can see immediately that there is a problem in the application layer. Drilling down to the application layer, I'll go and find out the actual physical problem, the site, the domain controller, the forest, or whatever it is that is requiring my attention to go and fix. This way I can stay ahead of the curve So I can actually see problems before they impact the users. So even though I have a big sea of red above here, I'm not freaking out too much because most of the end users can get it. However, my VoIP service, my telephone service, and my unified communication, that is a problem. That's a real life scenario that you guys have to probably look at today. These service maps you can build and generate how you want. We can rely on relationships that are already built in underlying systems. If you are a customer of our SCOM controlling system, a lot of these will be automated. An example is we have a lot of our customers now looking at Citrix, because Citrix is a really big scenario looking at COVID-19 and how users are working from home, needing their desktops. We've actually helped a lot of customers deploy our out-of-the-box Citrix service map on their management packs into SCOM, and then pump them into here to grab extra data from SolarWinds or Peer2G to show that people can actually access their work from home. That means that your infrastructure could be filled up with your network devices where, potentially a lot of those devices could be impacting other services. We track that as well. I just zoomed out a little bit to show you that you can, once you've built out your service map layering and you're pretty certain that all the objects are in there, or you've used our dynamic rules to make sure all the objects auto update into there, you can also map out the relationships. So you can say Active Directory supplies a lot of services and potentially is now impacting them. And that could be a reason why my VoIP service is down or about to have a lot of major impacts. Maybe that one domain controller or that site has problem logging in the users. We also gather information from the other target systems. So you can see here to help prioritize where your resources have to go. Actually, the hybrid service looks like the most important from a monitoring aspect. It's generated 44 alerts from all its monitoring tools, where it's also very high on my tickets at the moment. So 303 incidences exist for ServiceNow. It's the one I always demo to show that I'm creating tickets. So that's one potentially I want to focus on a little bit more than Link at the moment, where there's 12 alerts and only one ticket being raised by a user potentially. Hopefully they can still use Link. Obviously that's right now is going to be prioritized for me and COVID-19. Once you've grouped all those components together and you can start seeing it, the next column starts tracking the SLA, which you can control on various systems. So you can see down here, I have a couple of services which are green on the left, like for example, Jurgen's service or Parimatch or Office Online, where there are still reds to be had. But the agreement I have with the business is to make sure that the service is delivered. So the SLA I track is purely the end user part. So that's staying up in the air and I can show them that report. However, at any time, I can dive down onto the service and get an SLA overview. So not just a map of what's supporting the application, the infrastructure of the end user part, which alerts are there, which instances are there, but actually track the availability against the service and how it's been performing over that time. So you can see here, the end user is doing very well over a month period. We did have some problems back in January where we can actually zoom in on that and have a look at the downtime. And unfortunately, I think I'm not going to be able to do on this service. Let's go grab another service because that service didn't exist, or that feature didn't exist in January. So let's grab order entry, which I know is showing something today and yesterday, where we can actually zoom in and say, I'll just explain this dashboard. Left-hand side is the downtime. So the bigger the red bar that you see, the more downtime you've had. So the 24th, I had 20 hours of downtime. I had 24 hours of downtime on the 25th yesterday, and I'm about to have some nasty days today on the service. Bit of a pity. I'm still hitting my target, which is the green tile here at the moment. My target being 80%. Right now it's at 92. However, if I don't do anything in the next 94 hours for this month, that's going to be a big red box for me, and I'm going to have some explanation to do. In real time, I can take a dive back onto yesterday and find out exactly what caused the problem yesterday. You can see immediately here, it's the Cisco switch, which over the last 7 days has been down quite a lot. So potentially this is the main root cause for the downtime I'm having in my service. Let's just take a step back the day before, and you can see the day before I had a lot of individual problems coming from Cisco, Prime objects, and Peer2G. So yeah, I can safely say that that Cisco object is something we probably need to look into on the magnifying glass, diving into the monitoring systems and finding out what they have information-wise that could lead me into what's caused this, or just have a look at the regular alerts that come up around that time frame and see if it's something that my team is actually capable of fixing. So diving down into here, I can see the Cisco alerts from Peer2G. I can see they're being acknowledged, and I can see that there are a lot of alerts within here that are being picked up. This way you can start slicing, dicing the information, start providing the SLA context to people in real time, and give them the ability to start planning potential future resource investments for their application. Again, slightly different than just handing them a console to your monitoring platform and saying, hey, sort it out yourself. Here's a lot of performance characteristics that are trying to tell you that your disk fills up every time in the simple days. Where we focus on making it very easy for you to share. Everyone understands a web page, and everyone understands red, green, yellow as being a problem. I'll pause there because that covers most of the scenarios that we have in here, and I think that would wrap it up in here. Rob, just looking at you, I don't think I missed anything particularly.
No, I think there was a question about explaining what SLA percentage means. The last few minutes as you walked through and described how that's a reflection of the health for all the components underneath and the different ways that we can roll that up. So I hope that question has been answered.
Yeah, I'll just flip this open because I get this during demos as well. So the SLA is, the goal is pretty much manually set for you. You can set your time period of how long that's tracked for. Obviously your time zone for the services, because if you're spread around multiple time zones. And if it is important for your business, you can track what part of the day that has to be available. So if you have red outside of 5 o'clock, outside of these days, doesn't impact your SLA on the tracking. This is different than an availability monitor test. You still want your underlying monitoring tool like SCOM or Peer2G to actually keep monitoring it, because when you come in at 7 o'clock in the morning, you need to make sure that thing's green, otherwise it will start impacting your SLA outside of that. So that's what this refers to. It also does get impacted by the details that we set up here in the service as to which health rollup should impact your SLA. And you can do combinations of it. So for this service, for example, end user and application are what's adding up to its availability report on there. If I click on infrastructure, then everything in that row will then add up to the SLA, and it will do a recalculation from this moment onwards. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yep. So maybe time for two more quick questions. One I can cover is around deployment, whether this could live in the cloud. The answer is yes. We do have a number of customers who run IQ completely in the cloud with some collectors on premise. It's not today delivered as a true SaaS application. However, everything in the product itself has been designed with web protocols and communication. So the dashboarding, the data, everything can live in the cloud with data collectors on-prem, and the data collectors on-prem feed data into the system. And that can be running in AWS or Google Cloud or Azure. It doesn't really matter. So that's one of the questions. The other one, Justin, maybe you can quickly touch on before we jump to the last slide, is around roles, how users can control what parts of the application they can see and cannot see through role-based access.
Yep, just to add on your cloud components, from an administration point of view, there is a way to track how much data you're using, which is obviously a big concern with using cloud services, costings. There's also an agent system within us that allows us to go cross-domain. So when you do shift us into the cloud, or you want to monitor stuff in the cloud and you've only got certain ports open, we can act remotely across the domains to get the data centralized. So any environment is possible for us to pull it. I say this because a lot of our larger customers have security domains separated out, but still want to have all the data centralized. That's also a possibility within here. The roles part is managed essentially through our system. So when you install us, you will get 2 hard-coded roles, which is administrators and operators. Administrators is obvious. Those are the guys that keep this thing running. You can use any group or profile already available within Active Directory. So essentially coming in here and adding more users to the environment is adding simply here, hit search, and it will do a full search out of your Active Directory. I'd recommend narrowing it down to, be the person you want. So if you want Boba Fett to have access to the system, it's simply adding in here, and now he becomes an administrator within our system. So when he logs in, he will get access to all the systems. Administrators get access to everything. There's nothing you can block. Operators, however, you can block. They have a slightly advanced level versus users, but anyone who gets to be placed as an operator will have from the administration access to boards that they're allowed to see. So the board that we created during this demonstration, I'll just come in and search for in here, SQL for order entry, add that, and now anyone within the operator role will have access to order entry. And you can see here, there's also limiting rights to it, where if I was to apply read only, they cannot interact with the data, but they can just see the information as is. So that's where we limit them from being able to close or operate the alerts. Keep in mind that even read-only or non-read-only still does not grant them access to the underlying data source. They still need that separated out for them. Giving them access to integrations allows them to see the alerts and navigate through the system. And potentially, if you've not got them on read-only on everything, they can actually create their own boards based on the data that you've granted them from integrations. Outside of that, you can keep adding as many roles as you want. Any users that you add separately from this will not have the ability to create boards, but will have the ability to view them and operate them if given read-only access or more than read-only access. And again, it automatically locks into Active Directory, so you don't have to create accounts, create passwords, or anything like that. Essentially, we just log in with the user. So as long as the user is capable of working within your domain, he or she will have access to the web page from here. I think that covered the question.
I did want to take a moment just to speak about our trials, and we recognize that we're in unique times right now, lots of challenges that maybe you weren't aware of just a mere few weeks ago. So Martello is committed to helping you through these challenges. So we have a number of promotions and offers to help our customers through this difficult time. We'll have some follow-up from your account managers or proactively from our marketing team in terms of how we can best support you through these challenging times, and make sure that as you may be going through an explosion of remote work that you might not have planned for, that we're there to help you through that as best we can.
And I think that brings us to the end. Thank you very much for your attention. I know we are really glad that you can take some time out of your day just to talk to us. And if any of this did excite you, feel free to reach out to us and get hold of the free trial and the install. If you have any questions about what you need, prerequisites or anything, please reach out to us, info@martellotech.com, and we can definitely assist you with this at any stage. Thank you very much. Good.
Thanks everyone for your time today.
And we'll see you again on the next webinar. Thanks very much. Bye-bye now.